From the Scruffy City, it's time for Architecture, Coffee, and Ink. Hello, this is Hollywood C, and you're listening to Architecture, Coffee, and Ink, a podcast dedicated to introducing concepts, detailing out designs, and tackling the architecture you might not realize the meaning behind. I'm your hostess, and I am here today to start introducing you to the designs that make you wonder why. So I ask you to brew your coffee, grab your sketchbook and pen, and let's begin. Hello everyone, long time no here. So first and foremost, I would like to apologize for the unscheduled missing week. If you are brand new to the podcast, welcome. I am so sorry that this first bit is going to be a touch confusing though, but I will re-explain for everyone what had happened and what I am planning to do going forward with my podcast. This will probably be the last time I explain it in this much detail, so take a mental note, and if needed, feel free to come back to this episode. So, I went on a research trip for school, and unfortunately, when I was on my research trip, I ended up catching a cold that meant I was unable to record. I think you can probably still hear the remains of it in my voice. So I ended up skipping last week's episodes, which ironically enough was when I was going to be debuting phase 2 of my thesis. And it took quite a bit longer to overcome the cold than I was anticipating. From now on, until I graduate, I will be adding extra episodes focused solely on my research, but to keep everyone interested and involved, I will still be continuing to do global case studies, interviews, and research. Think 2 for the price of 1, double the amount of episodes. So in light of my accidental missed episodes, I wanted to let you know that I will be making it up to everyone. I will be releasing 1 episode from last week today, and the remaining 3 that were scheduled will be smuggled in and released before next week. Since I have already done most of the research, it will just be me catching up on recording the episodes. But in all fairness, I have re-recorded the intro about 3 or 4 times, so I can tell I'm still a little slow to warm up. But since I have a pretty big deadline as well on Thursday morning, I can't release all 4 at once, like I was hoping to do this week. Next week will be the new normal, and again, I cannot apologize enough for mysteriously ghosting everyone. I really wasn't anticipating the delay. I announced the delay on Facebook, and we'll figure out a way to do it on Insta and TikTok in the future. Speaking of TikTok, I will be recording and updating TikTok as well. I promise that as I continue to work and improve my podcasting skills, that I will also be working on keeping everyone updated and current. That being said, if you are still around and still listening, let's dive into this week's topic. So this week, I am proud to announce that I will be studying Knoxville, Tennessee for phase 2 of my thesis. As many of you know, this is where I go to school, so not only am I on site, I also have the opportunity to conduct the interviews face-to-face, which allows me the opportunity to talk to demographics that I wouldn't traditionally get to speak to, and that most firms don't always have the opportunity to speak with. While my actual process and conversation is more involved, I will be taking you, dear listeners, with me on a qualitative study, focusing on the city, people, and creating a documentary in a way, allowing the city and the people to come alive through the stories and the histories. If this isn't your cup of tea, again, don't worry. I will be releasing an episode on the Norwegian scenic routes later this week. I am trying to be as inclusive as possible and allow myself to be the facilitator of conversations and study how we as designers and architects approach them and the design process. But no matter how much I want to declare right now how this journey ends, the truth is this is one giant exercise in trusting the process. We have 3 months left to school. So the question is, will you join me in discovering a new way to look at design? Since we are going to be focusing this semester on Knoxville, and moreover the standard knitting mill in particular, I decided to kick things off with the history of Knoxville and a few interviews from some of the students of the University of Tennessee, both to introduce the topics and also as a control group. They were all too willing to help me by trying out the coloring pages of Knoxville I made and testing the standards of the interview process. But they also helped provide a good few starting points for the research, and I cannot thank them enough for being willing and helpful and always a good shoulder to cry on. So once again, thank you all. But before we begin, a clue I would like to tell all of you of a tale of scruff and lore. Each title brings about a tiny amount more of the pieces one by one, assemble together when it's done, and find the truth unveiled once more. But we are going to start an abridged early history of Knoxville. Call it the 10-cent tour of the origins. Undoubtedly, I will be revisiting and adding on more facts and information in the coming episodes. But the purpose of this episode is to both give a brief context and student perspective. The history of Knoxville, Tennessee started with the Paleo-Indian period. This is a good moment to remind everyone to always check your sources, check your facts, and more importantly, check me when researching. If you check out the first few sources on a general internet search for Knoxville history, you're going to miss a lot of information and could incorrectly be led to believe that the first people arrived in the region much later than they actually did. Recent discoveries and the research from those discoveries have led to an understanding that humans would have settled in the region much earlier. The most important aspect to remember as we begin our study is that most organic material will degrade faster. And this breakdown led to gaps in our understanding. Think, if you will, of plastics versus paper. Which one breaks down faster? That being said, I am not encouraging us to start overusing plastics in the quest of being good ancestors and giving archaeologists something to do in the future. Just spring load your coffin or something if you're trying to start a little mystery like the rest of us. Or, ask for your ashes to be scattered across your least favorite ex's lawn. We have a huge enough problem with microplastics and pollutions in the ocean already. The Paleo-Indian period is part of what is called prehistory. And it is called prehistory as it is part of the time before history was recorded or before written records. The primary proof of these people is based on the types of spear points that have been found. The difference between them, other than the general size and shaping, would be the types of tools used, whether they are fluted or lancelated, grooved, etc., however the spear itself is shaped. Additionally, the bones and the other remains can often be tested with carbon dating. This has led to an overall first period of 15,000 plus YBPs, or years before present. The McClung Museum of Natural History and Culture on the University of Tennessee campus has a lot of additional information and has several essays on the newer findings and studies being conducted. After that came the Archaic period, which spanned from 11,000 to 3,000 years before present. When looking at the artifacts from this time period, this is the first of the more stereotypical thought of arrowheads, where there is essentially a triangle on top with a tiny tail coming out. And even that is a rather large oversimplification of the facts. This would have been a hunter-gatherer society, and due to the larger expanse of time that they were present, there's overall a larger wealth of hard artifacts. Then comes the Woodland period, which is part of the pre-Columbian cultures in the North American prehistory. The Woodland period is actually chronologically the fourth stage from 1000 BC to AD 1000 roughly. Oftentimes, this is part of the cultures referred to as the mound builders. Two structures have survived since this time period, which is two burial mounds. One located on the University of Tennessee campus by the agricultural gardens, and the other located in the neighborhood in Knoxville. The best preserved one is the one on campus, as you would expect, and is somewhere that I have personally visited several times attending my nearby classes. This mound was from the late period and was added to the National Register of Historic Places. While the mound itself is believed to have been built from AD 600 to 900, it was added to the register only in 1978. Additionally, the area was occupied during the Mississippian period as well, and they were also characterized by the building of mounds. However, unlike the woodland mounds, these would have had another structure built on top of the mound. The best way to muddle through these is to understand that each society or group built and added something else on top of the pre-existing. Unfortunately, this is where my research from other classes comes into the conversation. So, on my trip, I was driving the Tennessee River, which actually goes through 4 different states. It was for something unrelated to the larger conversation we're having today, but, and this is a big but, the currently existing river is actually very different from what it was originally. So, for my international listeners, as part of a program called the New Deal, an agency called the TVA, or Tennessee Valley Authority, was established in the 1930s. 1933, sorry, that year I needed to double check. So the TVA was established as a way to pull the country out of the Great Depression that America was going through at the time, which it did as part of the Tennessee Valley Authority Act. Throughout its history, it created 29 dams across the river system, and due to this, it changed the river. This change in the river means that a lot of the Mississippian sites were actually affected. Not all of them, and one of my sources lists out where some are still around. I'm not going to list out every single site, but if you are interested in learning more about the prehistory, please contact me and I can get you more information. From here, it is believed, based off some information provided by 2 expeditions that occurred in the 15th century, that the region was then taken over by the Chiaha until the 18th century, when it was officially part of the Cherokee lands. The 2 expeditions that led to this information was undertaken by Hernando de Soto and Juan Pardo, both taken underneath the Spanish, though de Soto's route was based on the research conducted by John R. Swanton and Charles M. Hudson. Now, starting with the Cherokee in the 18th century is what I consider to be the start of the modern history of Knoxville. And I gave it capitalization and did air quotes and everything, because from here, I'm going to go through a brief, condensed early start of the area based off a previous project I did. And I have 4 pages of sources and a series of letters and things that I've compiled from my school library, so please bear with me as I craft this into a single narrative. So our story begins with a man named James White, who was born August 8th, 1747 in Rowan County, North Carolina. Over his life, he served with various militias and armies, including during the American Revolution. It was due to his service and what would be known as the North Carolina Land Grab Act that he would come to build James White Fort on an 1,000-acre lot of land. He actually explored the region until he served underneath the state of Franklin from 1784 to 1788. So over this time period, there were actually 2 cabins. He built one 9.5 miles from the second and final fort, worked for the state of Franklin, and then moved and built the one now known as James White Fort. Now, I think I made that sentence sound super confusing. So first fort, 9 miles away, worked for the state of Franklin, and then built the second final fort. This fort would over time come to serve as the capital. Now, of course, many of you are asking yourself, Hollywood, what do you mean by the state of Franklin? I took geography. I know that there's no state in America called Franklin. So Franklin was actually a temporary state created after the Revolution, when 4 counties declared themselves to be independent. It was kind of popular at the time. This was done August 23rd, 1784. While the counties were originally in North Carolina, This eventually all joined together into what is now Tennessee. All in all, it came down to the fear of being sold off to foreign countries to pay off war debts that occurred during the Revolutionary War. My favorite tidbit is that it was named Franklin with the sole express purpose of currying Benjamin Franklin's favor. I researched this fact so hard to double check that if it was true, because when I was a little girl, I did a huge project on Benjamin Franklin. And while I found the notes about this fact from then, I was a little afraid my past research was clouding my facts. But yes, out of everyone involved in the revolution, it was my boy Benny that they chose to name themselves after with the hopes that it would prevent them from being sold. It actually survived for 4 years as an independent nation until the mounting pressures caused it to rejoin America. In moments like these, I'm completely upset with myself that I didn't set up this podcast as a once a month 3 to 5 hour release because there is so much more history and backstory behind this. But James White Fort was built in 1786 and was chosen as the capital of the Southwest Territory in 1790. In 1791, White donated the land that will become Knoxville, while Governor Blunt organized a treaty with the Cherokee. In 1792, White and his son-in-law, Colonial James McClung, recognize that name, surveyed and divvied up the land and sold it for $8, with the rest of the land used to charter the Blunt College on September 10th, 1794. And why is Blunt College important? Because eventually it would one day become the University of Tennessee. And I will go more into that history at another time as we dive more and more into the subject. I will slowly build up the information about the town, so I will post on the blog the pretty bad timeline and drawing I did about Knoxville and the formation of James White Parkway. But for now, I'm going to stop here with the history. Each time, I will slowly add more and more. But just know that from here, a series of treaties occurred, railroad stations began coming into the region, and textiles slowly became a primary source of industry. Quarries in the 1919 race riots each left a mark on the city. Since its creation under the Washington administration, it survived both the Civil War and the movement of the capital away from it, and served as a, quote, cradle of country music. But for the rest of the history, you will just have to wait for. Instead, we're going to take a break from history and move into our interviews. Now, when I am speaking with the students, I chose to ask them the exact same questions and set up the controls and parameters for my research. So while I'm piecing together this next section, please note that the interviews were actually happening at different times, and I am piecing them together into a single narrative to start painting the first layer in the history of Knoxville. And with that, please enjoy. What brought you to Knoxville, and what made you stay?
I came to Knoxville for college, for undergrad. I came here. I was between NC State and North Carolina. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I was between that and Tennessee, and I decided I wanted something different. I didn't know anyone. I knew one person coming here from my high school, and I just wanted kind of a fresh start. So, Courtney, what made me stay? The reason I chose UT basically was I went to this honors program weekend, and I got to meet the other students here, and it kind of just like broke open. Like I was like, okay, these are cool people. It's not like I don't know what I thought of Tennessee, but I was like, okay, this is cool. I like it. And Knoxville's just a really great city. It's a lot smaller than Charlotte, which has been nice for me. It's been a nice change. So.
Sure. Well, what brought me to Knoxville is the architecture and landscape architecture programs. I lived in Nashville for 13 years before that and worked as a visual artist and educator. So yeah, school's what brought me here, and school is why I'm still here. I still have 2 more years.
I specifically came to Knoxville for UT's program. I moved here early so that I could try to get used to the area and also try to get in-state tuition. So actually kind of choosing this school was definitely contingent on the fact that the state didn't have requirements for in-state residency. So I was able to get in-state tuition by doing that. But also the other schools I was looking at, I kind of just liked Knoxville the most because of the Smokies and because of the weather. When I came, it was November. So in Michigan, it was very cold and horrible. And when it was here, the leaves were beautiful and it was warm. So that definitely impacted my decision.
School, undergrad brought me here, and then I stayed because my husband Alex and I really liked it, and he had a job here, and I decided to get my master's here because of in-state, and it was a bit more convenient, and I did like the program for what it was.
Okay. I came to Knoxville in the fall of 2015 for school. It's a state school. My mom's a teacher of public education. Got a discount. I also came to campus and actually really liked it and decided that this was a place for me.
Okay. And what made you stay, I guess? Is it just because you liked it so much?
Yeah, again, I think there are financial factors, but also the graduate program that I'm in landscape architecture, I happen to really like as well. I sort of had my eyes on it even while I was beginning undergrad.
I came here for the landscape architecture program, but I've been in Maryville for 4 years before that.
Okay, and what made you stay?
Well, I am staying because I'm finishing school, but also I'm planning to stay after school because I enjoy the community and the small feel.
What does Knoxville look like to you? Where do you go? Where do you experience?
I live in North Knox, and I probably experience, in terms of where I experience the most, it's North Knox and South Knox primarily, and then I guess the university. It's really, those are the main places.
So I kind of between the architecture building and then the greenways.
Okay.
I do a lot of running and biking and that kind of aspects, and since I've lived here, I've gotten into trail running.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in the urban wilderness, a lot of South Knoxville, as well as the Third Creek Greenway. I've lived on campus and near campus, so I was just always on that greenway and in the downtown areas. So that's the Knoxville that I know. I'm not very familiar with northeast Knoxville. So
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I moved here during the midst of the pandemic. I came in August 2020. And we got really lucky and found this great little house that is off North Broadway. So it's only 6 minutes from the Fab Lab and not that far from school, which is great. There's a huge number of homeless people in our neighborhood, especially down closer to Broadway. So that's, and they're right across from the Fab Lab. So I've definitely seen a lot of that. But I mean, for me and my partner, we really love hiking and kayaking and being outdoors, fishing, stuff like that. So that's been really nice to get to explore all the opportunities for that around Nashville.
Usually I go to the Old City kind of area, sometimes downtown. It definitely is different now versus when I was working full-time. When I was working full-time, I was in the Turkey Creek area in Cedar Bluff. So I spent a lot of time in West Knoxville, but now as a student, I'm mostly downtown. And then the other places that I normally go are the dog parks. So Knoxville is great because there's a million dog parks. And that's probably my favorite part about Knoxville.
Is that you want to?
Let's see. Anywhere I haven't been to. I would say Lenoir City area. I haven't spent a lot of time there. I've heard that there's actually some really cutesy things that are there, just from knowing people that live over there. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else I haven't been. I've been to Strawberry Plains, but not really. And I honestly kind of want to go drive around Strawberry Plains just for fun. So I would say that's my want to go place.
I live in the old city, which is downtown adjacent. And when I think of Knoxville, I sort of think of the different like urban textures. Campus has a lot of orange brick. Downtown, it really just feels like pigeon shit and concrete and more concrete. But I don't know. When I think of Knoxville, I think of a collage of just like built materials.
Is there any areas of town that you have never been to? Are there any that you want to?
Mean to you?
Oh man, I feel like I don't really have a lot of like ownership of that phrase. I hear from locals all the time, but to me it's more like the scrappiness of Knoxville as like almost like the younger sibling to Nashville, and like it's almost like industrial nature, and also the phase that it's in is probably more what I associate with it, which is I'm sure inaccurate, but it's like not fully gentrified, and yeah, it's kind of in this transitional phase. So.
Okay.
I feel like I need to explore North Knox more.
Okay.
Just like so many people live over there, and I never have a reason to go over there if I'm just kind of hanging out, or I always just kind of stay around my apartment. I'm just over the river into South Knox, so I think that's a part, especially because I feel like that's kind of growing and maybe gentrifying, but there's a lot of opportunity showing up there.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've really done a lot since we've been here. The things that I still want to do are kind of like outside of Knox County or Knoxville. Although I would really like to like go to some drag shows here. You know, just go out more in general, because what we've been able to do has been super duper limited because of COVID.
Yeah, that
But
definitely.
we went to an Ice Bears game, and it was super fun, and we didn't get COVID, so I'm pretty convinced we're like immune now.
Not really. I feel like I've been to everywhere that I wanted to go to. Like specifically in Knoxville City, are you talking about, or kind of in the area?
It's really whatever you interpret that question to me.
Okay.
Which I guess is telling in itself that you think of two different things.
Yeah. I don't know. I would say maybe like Maryville is so close that it seems like it could be possibly a spot to check out, but it's far enough that it's not convenient. And like, especially as students, people don't typically want to leave just the downtown area. So I don't know. I think I've seen pretty much most of what I have wanted to see, but I'm slightly curious about like Maryville, for instance.
Let's see. Anywhere I haven't been to. I would say like Lenoir City area. I haven't spent a lot of time there. I've heard that there's actually some really cutesy things that are there, just from knowing people that live over there. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else I haven't been. I've been to Strawberry Plains, but not really. And I honestly kind of want to go drive around Strawberry Plains just for fun. So I would say that's my want to go place.
I don't really get much into North Knoxville. I lived for a year south of the river, so I'm familiar with that area, but some of the more rural areas, like up towards like the northern end of the county, I haven't been too much.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite part of town, or a strong memory, good or bad, that you associate with a part of Knoxville?
I love to go to Wild Love. I feel like anytime I go there, it makes me feel like a summer day. When COVID first started, we had just bought a house in North Knoxville, and we would walk to Wild Love to get out of the house and order food there. And so anytime I go, I think about being able to walk and have the time to sit down and have a coffee without being stressed about getting to the next thing.
Favorite part of town. I mean, I love Happy Holler. That's where I'm at now, and I have really good memories just kind of associated with that because I like its walkability. There's a lot going on there for, I feel like what it is. Like there's just like a lot for like young people. So it's nice to like mill about around there. I got engaged on Gay Street Bridge. That's a strong memory for me, but I can't say I hang out there all the time, but it's a strong one.
I'm trying to think. I mean, the two firms I worked at downtown, I have feelings when I like run past or drive past their offices. Those are always interesting. I'm trying to think of like a specific. James White Fort always irks me. I'm just like annoyed by that and why it's there. I haven't been there before, but it just kind of bothers me because it's kind of like in the sea of highways, and it's like why was this thing saved and nothing else saved?
Okay, so it's more like the proximity of where it is that bothers you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I find myself along greenways, so that's kind of like my happy place is like Third Creek Greenway, even though it's starting to fall into Third Creek. But yeah, down by Ag Campus, it's a nice place to be.
Okay.
Oh wow, my house. I love my house. Like it's such a cute little cottage. My partner and I have been together nearly 8 years, and we always had to have roommates in Nashville because rent is so expensive. And here we each have our own bedroom, and we each have our own studio spaces because we're both artists. And we have this huge basement, so there's like all this storage, and yeah, I don't know, like I never really knew my neighbors very well in Nashville, and I met all my neighbors like within the first week, and we like hang out and shit. Yeah, here in Knoxville, yeah. So I mean, like I went to my next door neighbor's Halloween party. It was the best Halloween commute I've ever had. We just kind of stumbled back home at the end of the night. But yeah, I guess like the friendliness of people here has really was something that really struck me. Like even the friendliness of the people at my neighborhood Kroger. I'm just like, wow, like it really has that kind of small town vibe. And I grew up in a small town that was like that, and kind of expected Nashville to maybe have a little more of that. And I think it did when I first moved there, but then it just like exploded so much and so fast that it's like, you know, I don't know, just different, and unfortunately like maybe not quite as friendly.
Probably I really like the IAMS Nature Center. I think that's one of the things that's like pretty unique about here. The urban wilderness is like just the name branding of it, I think is like very telling about what Knoxville itself displays as. Because for instance, one of the things, if you ever Google, if you're like from out of town, if you say what are things to do in Knoxville, it's always the parks and like always these trails and stuff like that. And I think it's a little bit different in other cities. A lot of other cities, it's usually advertised as like food things or museums or activities and stuff. But here it's like this park or that park or this other park or this other park. So, but I think I am specifically like, especially the quarry is very interesting visually. And it's just like a really cool place to be.
And it was, really is an exaggeration, but downtown was a rougher area. A lot of people didn't go. There wasn't a lot going on, and Knoxville had its own red light district kind of thing, which I think is kind of bizarre when you think about it now. But I honestly think of the bar Scruffy City and the guy who owns it, who it's speculated that he made his money in some crazy ways. So I think it's like Knoxville will never be fully polished.
I lived in the Fort for 2 years, and it's they call Knoxville the Scruffy City, and the Fort definitely has those characteristics. But I liked it because it was a neighborhood like full of people my age that were all just kind of hanging out like all the time.
What does the phrase Scruffy City mean to you?
Oh man, I feel like I don't really have a lot of like ownership of that phrase. I hear from locals all the time, but to me it's more like the scrappiness of Knoxville as like almost like the younger sibling to Nashville, and like it's almost like industrial nature, and also the phase that it's in is probably more what I associate with it, which is I'm sure inaccurate, but it's like not fully gentrified, and yeah, it's kind of in this transitional phase. So.
All right. So for a while I was like really confused on what Scruffy City, what that was about, but once I did research and figured out that was started because we got the World's Fair, not nomination, but we got assigned to the World's Fair, or like won the bid. And everyone was like kind of mad about it. In other cities, they were like, Knoxville doesn't have anything. They don't need to have that. And it was a mentality of like, we're going to show what Scruffy City can be. And I think that's like very indicative of what Knoxville is. Like I feel like it never is something that people look at and they're like, oh, Knoxville, like I'm going to live there, until they have lived here and they're like, wait, it's actually pretty cool. Like there's a lot of things that are going on and the community's really strong. And so we are kind of like a scruffy little dog that's been out in the rain, but then, you know, it comes in and it cleans up and it's a nice dog.
An underdog story.
Yeah.
I think of Sutherland Avenue when I think of Scruffy City. I don't know why, but I think it's just like the eclectic mix of like random shops that are on there between the trailer homes and the auto shops, and then there's like the Chinese store and some like bougie restaurant too, and it's all like in the same block, and you're just like, how does this happen? It's like, it's just scruffy. Everyone just, they exist how they want to, and it just is.
So, how does the university influence your understanding of Knoxville?
Well, it's just about the only place I've been able to make friends. And I guess it's like, I think of it a lot as like a city within a city in a way. Like the university is huge. It's so big, and it's kind of like, it feels like it's as big as the rest of Knoxville in a way. But they also feel kind of separate. Like there's the school and then there's the town, but the school is the town and the town is the school. So yeah, I don't know. It's like this weird dichotomy. Yeah, I guess like from...
I really don't even know what that means. I've never understood it since I've been here. I think it probably partially means like casual, kind of like if you, for instance, if you go to like Market Square or something on a Friday night, you see a lot of jeans and like flannels and things like that. And I think that could be part of the culture here, versus if you were in a big city, people would be dressed up and like wearing heels and stuff like that. And, you know, you can't get into a club if you have tennis shoes on, but here you definitely can. So that's kind of my idea of what it means, kind of just being scruffy, being casual, kind of like you can come as you are, I think is kind of part of that.
So Scruffy City makes me think of how Knoxville was like 15, 20-ish years ago.
Okay.
When it was really is an exaggeration, but downtown was a rougher area. A lot of people didn't go, there wasn't a lot going on, and it, you know, Knoxville had its own red light district kind of thing, which I think is kind of bizarre when you think about it now. But I honestly think of the bar Scruffy City and the guy who owns it, who it's speculated that he made his money in some crazy ways. So I think it's like Knoxville will never be fully polished, if that makes sense. I think Knoxville takes on a lot of identities and somehow merges them all into one cohesive thing where it still feels authentic.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Scruff, it's not as maybe like, it's still, I mean, Knoxville's a bigger city, but it somehow doesn't feel like it's as big as it is. And I think a lot of that is just mainly like the character of the people that live here. It's a little more hippie, a little more granola.
How does the university influence your understanding of Knoxville? How can you see it through the eyes of a local?
So where do you experience?
I live in North Knox, and I probably experience, like in terms of where I experience the most, it's like North Knox and South Knox primarily, and then I guess the university. It's really, those are the main places.
It's just about the only place I've been able to make friends. And I guess it's like, I think of it a lot as like a city within a city in a way. Like the university is huge. It's so big, and it's kind of like, it feels like it's as big as the rest of Knoxville in a way. But they also feel kind of separate. Like there's the school and then there's the town, but the school is the town and the town is the school. So yeah, I don't know. It's like this weird dichotomy. Yeah, I guess like from being a student here, you kind of have that pride of place to a certain extent as well.
And unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But look out for the next part coming out soon, where I continue to fill in the history and explain just where the name Scruffy City came from. But as we end, remember, dear friends, the truth is in between us. But once again, a big thank you to all of my listeners. I know I say this every week, but please rate and review. If you liked it, loved it, hated it, let me know. I love feedback and hearing from everyone, and more importantly, sparking conversation. We again have a Facebook page and private group, both of which are under the same name, Architecture, Coffee, and Ink, which is again a pretty young podcast. architectureinc.design.blog is the website, and everything will be linked in the show notes. I will be posting the transcript and some images on the blog later in the afternoon, so please keep an eye out for that. But as always, may your coffee mugs be full and your inkwells never run dry.